Right, should we make a start? I'm going to keep moving this around just to get into Thomas's head, because it's been put here specifically to stop people wandering over here and talking off camera, which Thomas doesn't like. So I'm going to keep moving it around, so that's what's going on with that. This you already know, I think we've done this another time, haven't we? What we've done a little bit this morning is play around with the agenda, the order of the agenda a little bit, so that will change it slightly from the advertised agenda. And the person who's coming to start and talk about Innovate My School very briefly at the beginning hasn't arrived, so I'm going to move straight on and then I'll slot him in. As you'll be aware, we've got an Innovate event next door after this, and colleagues, whether you've booked on or not, colleagues are very welcome to stay and sort of participate in that. So, first thing on the agenda for today then is the reintegration protocol and the risk of exclusion audit. So, in terms of the risk of exclusion audit, it needs to start with an apology, obviously. It's always nice to send something out to people that they're not expecting a week before the end of term, so you're welcome for that. And what I would say is we consciously did scope it back to be as limited as we could because of that, because we recognised that we were asking people to do something that they weren't expecting to do, and so close to the end of term. I think from speaking to colleagues, people are appreciative of why we would want that information and how useful that information might be at a time when we're thinking about and planning what kind of provision we need in the city over the next little while. We've also had colleagues who've said actually it's quite frustrating to fill it in because it's only asking about year 5 and 6 and we want to talk about all of the other year groups, and we do totally understand that. What will happen is this will be the first of a regular sequence of doing this, and I think it's something that we would want to monitor. I also think we can do a lot more sophisticated analysis than boys and girls, which essentially is what we've asked for at this stage. It's quite likely that we'll come back to you in the autumn and ask for names, but again, because of the lateness of the hour, if you like, we obviously needed to do this in a way that was very easy for people to reply to. So it doesn't require secure transfer, you can literally just reply to the email because you're only giving us numbers, you're not giving us anything sensitive. But in future, it will be a more formal process and we'll ask for more information. And clearly, it's something that we think can give us the baseline and provide information to support us in planning. The reason that we'll probably come back and ask for names is that I think the primary inclusion panel would like to do a bit of cross-referencing between the children who've come to the panel and been brought to the panel as being at risk of exclusion and where they sit within a broader audit. So are they the tip of an iceberg? Are they part of a much broader group? Are they the ones who come out in a particular place and against those criteria and so on? If you complete your researches by the end of August, and I can't stress enough thank you, because we are aware that it's not ideal to be asking for information this late in term. Okay, reintegration protocol, I'm introducing it today, or talking about it briefly today, just so you've got some information. Clearly this will be something to come back to in September. It's the lack of a protocol, as in that there isn't a protocol for reintegration of pupils who've been excluded, was identified by the primary inclusion panel. So I think there's an understanding now that this is a significant gap in our approach as a city. Currently, reintegration, as it says there, is on an ad hoc basis. So what happens in reality is parents are asked for a preference, as in a single preference. They look at where there are available places and then they make phone calls, and heads can accept or not accept, and so on. In other words, it's extremely ad hoc and not very productive. The proposed protocol has been based on the secondary one. Okay, so there is a secondary one that's in place, but there are some key differences, and those 3 key differences are on there. The first thing in the protocol for primary that's being proposed is that a receiving school would only take 1 pupil per year. Okay, now that might seem an obvious thing, but actually if you look at the pattern of exclusion within the city, it's concentrated in disproportionately in certain areas. So actually that's quite a challenge, and there is a real danger that you could have a situation where schools are being asked to take multiple pupils. This is much harder in primary than it is in secondary, because obviously secondary children can travel. So actually what happens in secondary is that there's a fair access protocol. The secondary heads accept that they will accept the finding of the head teacher panel, and children then go to different places. Clearly in primary that's much more complicated because realistically there are significant logistical issues in taking a child from one side of the city to the other. So the first thing is that receiving schools would only take one pupil per year. Secondly, parents are going to be asked for 3 choices of school in this situation rather than 1. And again, that's to try and get into that issue of trying to support that, so that actually it is more feasible to say we will only allocate 1 pupil per year to a school. And then the last one is around Y6 pupils, and the proposal there is that they would, any Y6 pupil who was being reintegrated back into mainstream following exclusion would be jointly registered with the primary inclusion centre until they make their transition into Key Stage 3. So in other words, if you took a child in Y6, you would be, they would be having that child jointly with the primary inclusion centre, and obviously that has implications for what happens to their outcomes and so on. So that's those are the main differences with secondary. An independent panel, which includes head teachers and the local authority, is going to meet every half term. That's the proposal as it stands from yesterday. When I wrote this earlier on this morning, it was every 20 days, but I think they've decided half a term would be enough, given the smaller flow of exclusions in primary to secondary. Prior to the panel, so before a child comes back to the panel as a proposed potential reintegration, there would have been a visit to the inclusion centre to see that child by an experienced head teacher. So there would have been an experienced head teacher who would then be in a position to contribute to the discussion about whether that child was ready for reintegration or not, because that's the decision that the panel has to take. The panel is there to look at a significant, at a number of cases each time and make a decision about whether it is appropriate, firstly, for that child to be reintegrated. In other words, are they ready to do that? And then secondly, then to make the decision about where we're proposing the child should go. That's the purpose of the panel. Though with completion of a readiness for reintegration analysis tool, they have been looking at that and trying that out with on there. That's not ready for sharing at this point, but it is something that is in place at the moment already. And then the last part is that there will be a package of support and an action plan designed by the Primary Inclusion Centre to maximise the chance of success. So in other words, if you're receiving a child who comes with at least 4 weeks of outreach from the Primary Inclusion Centre and their involvement in scoping what that transition needs to look like and what the support for that child needs to look like, which feels like a much more rounded approach, I would say. Currently the Primary Inclusion Centre is working beyond its capacity. I think it's worth saying that we have had a quite significant spike in exclusions in primary, and we are at a point where there are children who it is felt are ready for reintegration and certainly should be being considered for reintegration, but actually that's not possible at the moment. So we're not in a particularly good place with that at the minute. The primary inclusion panel wants basically to bring this to your attention, and we're looking at how we then gain approval for this protocol. That's not as straightforward as it might be, because when I was involved in the secondary heads group that decided on this at the start of this year for secondary, and obviously they all fit in a room. So they have their half-termly meeting, they propose it, they discuss it, and then they vote. And if the majority vote for it, then it binds everyone to that decision. That's obviously more complicated for us in primary because we don't all fit in a room very easily. So we will need to have, alongside this, a discussion about how we go about approaching this at the start of September. But it is something that I feel has a certain amount of urgency to it. So I know Paul and I have exchanged emails this week, and I think there's an intention to discuss this at the PLP, but I think that's probably towards the end of that first half term, isn't it? So we'll just need to think about how that works. Clearly, this is the kind of activity that we would want to be involved in, wouldn't we? We'd want to be supporting. And I think what we've got here is a much more robust, transparent model. And I think that's the other part of this to me. Yes, there's a practical issue to it, but this feels robust and it feels transparent. And I think as a head teacher, it feels right to me that the decision about whether this child is ready to reintegrate is made by my colleagues alongside colleagues from the local authority, and that the system is understood and straightforward. So that's where we are with the reintegration protocol, and I think this will be something we'll be talking about very quickly into September. Okay. Does anybody want to ask anything about that before we move on? It's not, obviously, I'm presenting this information for the panel and I'm not on the panel, but I'll do my best if anybody's got questions.
Is it like looked at as something that you can go over your numbers?
I'm not sure, to be honest, about that. I'd have to check that, but I think it's a good question, so I'll pass that one along. Okay, alright, we'll move on then in that case. But I just want you to be aware of that and where the thinking is so that you can be pondering that before we get to September. Okay, whilst I'm here, I'll do the Learn Sheffield update. I've moved this forward. Priorities and governance training I'm going to talk about in a second, a couple of slides to share with you there. Just want to thank colleagues again for support with the workshops that we've done. Term time calendar has been out for consultation. I hope you've answered that consultation. I've not heard the outcome, but I'm expecting that we will hear something this week, I would assume, before we break up. In terms of the academisation, thank you to colleagues who attended the event last week with Innovate and Smith. The questionnaires will be going out during the summer to the existing maps, and we'll gather that information together and make that available from September. But in terms of the academisation agenda, so thank you for your support of those. School improvement services, I'm not going to talk about very much. You're aware of what they are and they're on the website. I think Bev might well refer to those when she talks about school improvement later on. The next one's the one I want to really focus on, professional development networks. We've talked about this a tiny bit. I just want to make sure that you're aware of what's coming, because it's potentially one of those nice, quite substantial free things, and it's always nice when those substantial and free can be used in a sentence, isn't it? We want to plug the gap of professional development networks. So we've not had, for example, subject leader networks. We've not had that kind of activity for quite a while, I think, in Sheffield, and we're very aware that it's very fragmented. So there are some very high functioning networks. I think particularly around EAL would be one really good example of that, really strong network, funded through a pocket of money, essentially, and then it's something that grows and flourishes. We've got some networks which are traded, and some are successful, some less successful. I think there isn't is that sort of sense of it being comprehensive, and a sense that there's stuff available for all different subjects, all different types of thing. What we've done is decided that we will fund them for next year. So we've worked with the teaching school group, and we've asked them to take a lead on this, which they have done, and they're working collaboratively on it, and all 6 teaching schools are involved in the delivery of this. And we're funding something like 25-30 professional networks next year. Now, they run across all different sectors, so that includes secondary ones and primary ones and so on. But those will be made available, and they will be kind of free at source. Okay, so what you will get, hopefully this week, but as it's now, we're into this week and it's not materialised yet. I'm thinking it might be into the start of the holiday, possibly. But what you'll get fairly soon is a list of all of the networks that are happening next year. What we're trying to do is get them into a window in each term. Okay, so we're trying to say, in this 1 or 2 week window, in the autumn and the spring and the summer, all of these networks are happening. We've done that so that schools who want to engage with that have got the option, if they want, to say, well, actually, we perhaps won't have a staff meeting in that week, because we're assuming that everyone's going off to different networks, and that's the professional development that we're doing this week. Not saying you have to do that, but we're trying to give you the facility to do that if it's possible. So the networks the information will be out shortly. There's a lot of conversation happened about which ones can be cross-sector, which ones need to be just primary or secondary. I suspect in the first year the majority of them will be for a single sector, but what we have done is ask the leads of the 2 networks, if there's a primary and secondary one, to speak to each other and synchronise the content to make sure that we're getting the best out of that. So that information will be with you shortly. We are assuming that if it is successful in the future, it might well become a traded thing. It might well be a thing where we say, right, this is how much it costs to run it, this is what it costs if we split that up and we trade it on that basis. But for the first year, to determine whether this is something that's valuable to schools, we're funding it and running it centrally, and there won't be any cost associated to it. Okay. Meeting cycle, just to say, thank you very much for various people with various groups have contributed to this, but Evelyn's collating all of that, and we will, by the time you come back in September, and I think it will be probably during the summer at some stage, on our website there will be a comprehensive set of meeting dates for all the different localities, for all the different groups that happen, so that there's a single place you can go to should you want to access all of those meeting dates. But just wanted to take the chance publicly to say thank you to all the people who have facilitated that and have changed dates here or there to avoid clashes and so on. But that will be there for September. Okay. Right, a couple of quick ones from me, and then I'll pass over to colleagues. On the priorities, this is currently it's currently in the final proofreading, final version of the priorities. You'll notice a slight change in the pretty picture, in that what we've done in the final version is we've put that system culture priority and the school improvement priority as overarching to the others. Obviously, to inclusion, to workforce, to readiness and to enrichment. There are some differences, there's not lots of differences, most of it is as it was in the consultation. The feedback from the consultation was phenomenally positive, and thank you to everybody who's participated in that. But what was really, I think, particularly pleasing was where people had got a view, they didn't just come and say, actually I don't like that, or I don't like that bit. What they did was come back and say, I think that's not quite what it needs to be, and I think it needs to look like this, and then they wanted to have a discussion about the content. Great example of that would be around, in the inclusion one, around the language around EAL. So we'd taken a little bit of a punt, I think, in the original draft and talked about cultural and linguistic challenges. And actually what the feedback came back was that's confusing. What you need to say is it's about EAL and it's about language acquisition. And I think that sort of feedback is incredibly helpful. So this will be out later this week or early next week. It'll be on the website, it'll come out to you as an email, but obviously, as with other things we're talking about today, it'll be more formally launched in September, and there'll be activities to come and get involved in, and we're thinking, Bev and I, an open day, probably early in September, which we'll get a date out to you for shortly. So that's where we are with the priorities. Governance training is on the website now. Just want to be really clear about that, how it's working. If your school, when you did the trade of service offer with the council in April, ticked the box that said you wanted governance training, then this is the package that you're getting. Okay, so if you've done that, you don't need to do anything. We've effectively been commissioned to deliver that. You also, if you haven't ticked that box, can just sign up with us directly, and obviously we're not charging anything different. I think it was £500, so it's the same if you get it through us as it is if you did it through the council. The other thing we're doing is we're synchronising. At the minute, there's a different sign-up point in the year for academies and for maintained schools. I don't think that's massively helpful from a planning point of view or from a school point of view. So what we're talking about here is an offer that will run for the whole of next school year. So if you're a maintained school and you signed up in April, you get from September to the following September, and if you're an academy and you sign up in September, you get from September to September, so then it will be kind of lined up. Technically, I think that's a free term for maintained schools, but given that, as far as I'm aware, there was hardly any training on offer, it doesn't feel like a particularly much of a difference, to be honest. So it's available online now, it's available in the PDF form. What's there now gives you the scope of it. Okay, so it basically tells you all the sessions that will be run next year and are as part of this offer. What will replace it over the next week or so is the same information, but with actual dates and venues in place. So we're trying to get all of the dates and venues in place by the end of the summer, so everybody knows exactly what there is. And obviously then we'll communicate with you what the booking information is and how that will work. If you're interested in it, you just need to contact us if you haven't already. In terms of the content of it, there is the different types of training that are available within the offer. There's induction training for new governors, which is quite robust. I think it's a 4-session programme. And obviously, I should be clear, if you subscribe, then you can send anybody to anything in this offer as to whatever degree you want. There's also development training. Development training is the kind of every year training, if you like. It's the stuff which is more what governors will recognise as training, a training session with a trainer delivering that session. And generally is on topics that will be there every year. So it's school finance and so on. Again, quite comprehensive. I think there are something like 15 or 20 different programmes running. Most of them are either 1 session or 2 sessions. Then there are leadership seminars. The leadership seminars are a slightly different type of session. So they'll often come with something to read or look at in advance. There'll be a facilitator who will make a kind of expert input, if you like, into the discussion, but it is a seminar. It's an opportunity for people to have a conversation with colleagues. I think some of those actually might be of interest to heads as well as to governors, or it might be that we run parallel ones if that's what people would like us to do. And at the moment there are about a dozen of those, I think, on the list. That will grow because obviously those are meant to be scoped around hot topics. So when a hot topic comes up, then we would add a leadership seminar about that, so that will grow through the year. There's an online package in there as well, which is the one that's already been purchased by the City Council, which is called GEL, so the information about that is in there. There's a conference for governors which will be in March and is on a bit of a different scale from governor conferences that we've done before. It's not a briefing with people like me coming and doing an update. The briefings are separate from this. This is a proper conference. Again, I think as part of your offer you get one free ticket and you get a discounted ticket as well as part of your package. The free stuff that's in there, it obviously anybody can access whether they've bought the system package or not, but it's there so that there's one place to look. That's the briefings that we'll run through next year. It's access to the safeguarding, where we're just directing people to the safeguarding areas training, and then it's some information about national leaders of governance and what governing bodies can access from them for free and how they do that. And then there's some information about consultancy, which obviously is outside of this package. So that's the governor training. If you signed up through the council website, that's what you're getting. If you want it, contact us and do it directly with us. And as I say, the dates and all of the detail will appear over the next few weeks. Okay. But you can have a look now and see the scope of it. I have to say, I do think it's phenomenally good value, but it needs to be, I think, a step up, doesn't it, from where we've been. Okay. Now, at that point, I should be handing over to Carolyn, but before I do, I'll just introduce. Do you want to come and just quickly, 2 minutes, just explaining what's happening afterwards?
Sure, yeah.
Yeah.
Are you speaking about that?
Yes,
yeah, I'm just here. I'm hosting the Innovation Speed Date later. I'm not sure how many of you actually attended the first one we did. We've been invited back by Stephen because it went down really well. This is actually our 129th Speed Date to date. It's my company. We've grown it on the back of the Speed Dates by bringing the latest innovations to head teacher clusters like yourselves. My dad was a head teacher himself in Liverpool, and I know he didn't have time to attend the likes of the BET show and the education show, so I was bringing and cherry picking some of the best innovations out there. You know, I noticed you've got school improvement on there. We've got an assessment product all designed for clusters and need in mind. So we've really worked hard to try and create quite an exciting speed date for you. And I know we have a sign-up page, but it isn't necessary that you actually signed up. Just come along after. It'd be brilliant. As I say, we've done 120. This is our 129th speed date. We've speed dated over 3,000 school leaders to date. It's kind of our headline stat. And we've actually just recently been booked by GEMS in Dubai to run a speed networking concept speed dating in Dubai. So we're really excited about that. That's it really. I hope that you do stick around after. We've got 8 innovations. I don't want to tell you too much about them because it's part of the excitement. So thanks for seeing you later.
Spoiler alert. Yeah. Carolyn, do you want to come and join us? So our next presentation is from Carolyn Leary, and I think a lot of you will be familiar with this. Really pleased to see you today.
Okay, I'm going. Okay, works great. Lovely. Thank you very much for inviting me. I'm very pleased to be here this morning. Particular thank you to Chris Jennings, who helped set up this invitation, so much appreciated. I obviously know a number of people in this room. So some people here will be familiar with CRESST. CRESST is an organisation that's a small locally based charity set up initially through a Quaker legacy, and we've been running for about 12 years, and we do a lot of work around conflict resolution, education and skills across not only Sheffield schools but quite a bit wider than that, so covering primary, secondary, specialist schools, and we're doing quite a lot of training, staff training in restorative approaches, etc. There's quite a number of people here who, where we will have worked in your school. Whose schools have we worked in over time? So there's a fair number of people. So, okay, if I run through the presentation, you might like to offer other people your thoughts and reflections on working with CRESST and what it's done for your school. So this last year, this is our headline stat. We worked out we've directly trained around 2,000 children, young people and staff this year, and we've also been working in the field of restorative approaches as well. So peer mediation is one of the kind of core bits of what we do, and I'll explain the whole package of what we do, but this is a kind of the major kind of part of it. So basically what we're about is working with young people for them to learn conflict resolution skills themselves. So we create a model within a school for young people to support each other through conflict and help resolve disputes. So one of the key things that we do is invite pupils to step forward as volunteer mediators. We then offer them an intensive training, and they become mediators following our very clear 5-step process. We've got all sorts of checks and balances and guards in place, but they then mediate and help resolve disputes, particularly those that take place during break times and lunch times. And they are incredibly good at it. So the ones who step forward and actually want to do this are just stunning, and I think many schools would say that they'd be really surprised to find how some young people have absolutely stepped up to this challenge and have managed to do things that some adults might find really difficult to do. So I thought I'd start off with the voice of one of the young people. So Holly from Arborthorne. Arborthorne have been running a very successful peer mediation programme for many years now. And Holly we actually use this in a letter to Nikki Morgan. It's just very clear, it's made it safer, there's not as many arguments, they get sorted out earlier on. And the lessons, particularly in the afternoon after lunch breaks, the lessons are better because they're not taken up by teachers having to resolve all the break time disputes. So it's a kind of very simple idea, but it works incredibly well, mostly. So why do it? Obviously this helps meet some Ofsted requirements, the SMSE agenda, British values, etc. But it's also about giving young people the opportunity to take responsibility in their school, particularly Y5, Y6, to step up, to step forward, to be really positive role models for the younger ones in your school. And it particularly strengthens, reinforces your school ethos, the idea that you can make mistakes, but you can reconcile them, you can move forward, you can find solutions, and you rebuild the relationships where, you know, the disputes have caused hurt, caused damage. You've got an opportunity to actually rebuild those and repair those. And for the staff we've trained, be they lunchtime supervisors, teaching assistants and teachers, this is, for many of them, is kind of giving them a greater toolkit of how to deal with difficult situations between pupils. I won't mention anything about stuff from this. So the schools where we have worked, we go out and we do regular evaluations and pick up case studies where the schemes have been running for some time. And there is a general message from head teachers: it frees up more learning time, that staff begin to kind of get the idea that actually young people can resolve some of these things themselves, and you don't as staff always have to go in and always make the judgment and always come up with a solution. You can actually get the young people to do this themselves. It's great for how the older pupils become looked up to by the younger ones, and becoming mediators becomes actually a very attractive role that people aspire to. So calmer break times, and just acknowledging that sometimes children actually like talking to other children about some of these issues because they really understand what it's like and they understand what it's been like. Recently, the UN Committee on Rights of the Child makes reference to the need for more, specifically a recommendation about the UK, the need for more conflict resolution skills amongst young people, so it's hitting that agenda too. So basically the way we work is we would meet with you, we would talk through what's going on in your school, we would look at whether you'd be interested in capturing some baseline data of how much conflict is going on in your school, what kind of impact you think that's having. We've got all sorts of tried and tested questionnaires and ways of gathering that information. We offer lessons for all Y5 and Y6 pupils in conflict resolution skills. We can either do that as a 2-lesson very short series, or we could do a half term, an hour a week. and then invite pupils to step forward. They have to apply to be mediators, they have to fill in an application form to say why they'd like to be, they have to get 3 referees, so this is taken quite seriously from other young people, from somebody from home and from a member of staff in school. And we then offer 10 hours worth of training, often done over 2 days, it could be done over 5 afternoons. So that's quite intensive training, and they practice and do lots of role plays, lots of games, lots of activity, a lot of fun. So we train about 25 to 30 volunteer mediators, and they can then run a rota in school. We'll also offer staff twilight training, specific workshops for lunchtime supervisors, which we think are really critical. It could be quite easy for the lunchtime supervisors to kind of undermine the mediators if we don't sort of build that understanding very well. We've done governance briefings, parents' workshops, either a one-off workshop or even a series of workshops we've recently run. And we could do something more extensive in terms of looking at restorative approaches throughout the whole school system, if that's what's required. We do constant feedback on all the work that we do, but also follow-up evaluation and impact visits, and we've got plenty of information and evidence from schools, including schools here, that for some pupils it can make a difference on attendance, it makes a general difference about feelings of safety, calmer break time, so you'll see the list there, but we can evidence all those things have been impacted positively. Not necessarily for every pupil, obviously, but within the school. So we would meet with you, talk about needs. We're very keen to look at start point data so that we come back and see what impact there is. We would need dates to start off some of these introductory sessions, a recruitment process, whether you would want us to do more work with staff, with governors, with parents, and financially the way the programme works is, as a charity, our trustees do a huge amount of fundraising, and so we would cost a kind of whole programme for a school to be around £4,000, of which our trustees will raise at least 75% of that. So we'd be looking for a contribution of about £1,000 from a school, and we'd work with you sort of throughout a year. But what we've also done, though, is work closely with schools to help them raise that money. So it could be out of school budgets, but equally we were very successful with Greystones, for example, in a bid to Awards for All, which actually funded the whole programme, which is great for us, which of you. So, you know, we please don't let money be the only reason why you don't have us. We have all sorts of imaginative ideas and ways forward on that. We also, once a year, run a conference where schools are invited to bring 10 peer mediators. We run it at the university. It's an amazing day, and where we just feel so privileged because we gather some of the most fantastically inspiring young people together. We had about 150 at the university in January. These are all young people who believe the world can be a more peaceful place, so they're a total delight to be with. It's a lot of fun. We do loads of games, we do lots of activity, there's lots of conversation. They get a sense that they're part of a kind of citywide movement, and we always end up with some clowning, entertaining things in the afternoon. So it's kind of our way of saying thank you to them, because they usually give up about one lunchtime a week, and we appreciate what they do, really, because I think it makes a lot of difference. So that's an example of one of the things we do. We base a lot of things on active echo listening. So, you know, things that are said, we encourage young people to then echo it back to the person who said their story. We encourage them to think about how to miss out the exaggeration or the name calling or the mind reading, what somebody, you know, they meant to get me into trouble and all this thing, and the threats. And we get them to echo back facts and feelings. So you were really upset about that. So we teach them a whole set of communication skills. It is based on speaking and listening skills. It's based on, and it is based in English. We've done it working with translators in other languages, and that is possible. But it's very much based on non-violent responses to conflict and the need to use language to get yourself through those situations. So, I'm going to stop there. That was a very fast run through, but I'd be keen to invite anybody here who's had us working with them to make any comments or feedback, and also answer any questions. And thank you very much for having me. We also do a lot of adult training, staff training, so I've handed out sheets for our next autumn programme. We'd be very happy to come and do, I'd be interested to know actually whether you think there would be interest in a kind of governor's workshop, maybe a Saturday morning, looking at dealing with conflict in schools and how we train young people to manage their own conflict. So we'd be very up for doing that as well. And yeah, so would you like to, any of the schools that we've worked with?
You're doing with the Key Stage 1 school?
Yes, we do. We've focused less on peer mediation as a kind of using the older ones with the younger ones, and much more on circle time, using circle time techniques. So we've done, I think most recently we did 2 terms of the work with Holt House infants, but using circle time techniques, but to really use those to build up a lot of children's self-awareness about their emotional responses to things, and to build up their use of language around those things. So,
And what are the costings for things? Obviously, useful to know the programme that we'd be on for.
right. What's the questions that it just depends how much you want, and I'm very happy to talk to you a bit about that. So, but it is something we'd also want subsidised through charitable fundraising.
So we were saying as well in the booklet that came out, the primary opportunities one, there were 2 pages dedicated to this. So there's all the contact details and all your information's in there as well, isn't it? Which was
Lovely.
in the email that went out.
Thank you. We just about 2 days ago launched our new website, so we've just got a few more bits to upload, but it's www.crest.org.uk. So, would any of the schools we've worked with like to? I've not primed anyone, so.
As you say, it's. I mean, it has. I could answer about the difference it's made, and it has made a huge difference. But I think the amount of value that the children themselves place on peer mediation is enormous. They really do see it's something that's a real voice for them in school. The children themselves much prefer to go through peer mediation and have any adult involved or deal with it, and the outcomes are always seem to be a lot more positive and permanent. It also has massive value amongst the parents and community. They see it as something incredibly positive, not just the fact that the children are doing this, but the skills that it's promoting and the approach that it promotes. So, yeah, very positive thing about it.
It's good development for the school and supervisors as well, because often the children are more skilled and have got the time to invest. So it is really effective and self-sustaining, because this time of the year we train year 5s to do the job on the year 6s, and they then shadow the year 6s. So they've done it themselves once you've done it. So.
Yes, I mean we've found more and more that some schools have managed just to get into this rhythm, this momentum, so it does sort of run itself. Yeah, and obviously it does need staff support in the early days, and it's crucial, I think, that somebody, whether it's a teaching assistant or whoever, meets with the mediators maybe 20 minutes a fortnight or something like that, but really kind of holds the group together. But certainly a number of schools then just appoint, a lead mediator or 2, for a month, and they organise all the meetings and they gather people together, and they just take responsibility for making sure, the lanyards or the jackets or whatever are in the right place, the rota's done, and so more and more this can be handed over to the young people as they grow into the role. So I think that's been quite a few people's findings. So. Yeah, it's a huge, it seriously does take some pressures off staff a little bit. Any other questions or comments from any other schools?
I was just going to echo really what colleagues have said, but I think the other 2 things I would say, the impact on the young people who do it is phenomenal. Absolutely, the actual mediators is incredible. and I think we've often used that as a tool for turning individuals around, because it does give them something to focus on, and it's something that they're learning the skills, but they also can make a positive contribution, which is something that perhaps they've struggled with. And the other thing I would say is, from a school perspective, go big on it at the start, because the impact on the culture of the school can be really significant, and as you said, the impact on lunchtime supervisors and on the wider community can be really significant if you don't do it quietly. If you do it, staff training, governor training, parent training and so on, it has a real, it's like dropping a pebble in the pond, I would say.
So we have slightly grown our team of trainers, so we're up for more business in the autumn, so I look forward to hearing my phone ringing a lot. Thank you.
And we'll talk about governor training as well.
Are you stealing our
Yeah.
so that's not going to spot that.
We're all over.
Okay, next presentation, slightly different in tone, because the next one's a heads up about something that's coming that you would be a little bit aware of, but maybe not as aware of. Pam's going to come and talk to us about the EAL categorisation in school census in October. You may have seen Schools Week had a quite good article on this as well yesterday. It's worth which we retweeted, and it's worth a look as well.
Okay, right. Yeah, the school census information that was published in April actually contained quite a few new stipulations that I think we were aware of, but not quite. We haven't quite registered the implications of them. And as this term's gone on, I have realised that they are quite significant. The implications involved in this census information. For example, from October, you are going to be expected to enter some of the characteristics of your pupils that you have already had to enter traditionally, but some new ones. So the ethnicity is something that we know about. You've had to do that for quite a long time. The 5.3.2, a language code. You're going to have to enter a language code for those children who speak English as an additional language. Now, if you have a look at the quote on there, a first language where it is other than English is recorded where a child was exposed to the language during early development and continues to be exposed to that language in the home or the community. So basically, we're not just talking about our new arrivals here, are we? We are talking about maybe second, third generation Pakistani families, for example, where there still is a lot of talking home language in the home. They're not the only group, obviously, but I'm just making, using that as an example. So it's quite a wide-ranging group of pupils that you're going to be expected to enter a language code for. You are going to have to enter their proficiency in English. And I think that's the bit that I want to talk about in much greater detail shortly. And a country of birth. And that's a new bit as well. Country of birth. With many of these codes, actually, you are going to be able to put a refused or not yet discovered, not yet recorded in the first instance. So, don't worry about that if you think that might be a bit of a challenge right from the beginning. However, if we just have a look at the proficiency in English codes for a minute and think about when this is going to be collected. You're going to have to start doing this from this October's census. You'll be expected again to do that in January, for the January census. Now, if we have a look at the annual collection there as part of the census, you must record a proficiency in English where both of the following conditions apply. Well, where language has been recorded as anything other than English or believed to be English, and then we're just really looking at children from reception up. So just moving on then, let's have a look at the proficiency in English codes. I mentioned the October date. The information will be collected in this October census, so that's the first week in October, isn't it? And then the assessment task will entail having to assess all your EAL pupils using a 5-scale assessment and using a best fit judgment. The initial collection will be in autumn, and then every subsequent January. Now, from this October, you can enter a not yet assessed code. But from January and every subsequent January census, you must have assessed all your pupils according to this 5-step proficiency code. I think even then, it's quite interesting to reflect upon the implications. For example, if you do have a high number of EAL pupils and you're going to take that advantage of writing that N code and it's assessed, there may be implications, in terms of, what provision are you really identifying for those children? If you're expecting an Ofsted inspection, you may come across an inspector who wants to talk to you about the assessment that you've done on your EL pupils and what provision is in place. So I do think there's there's a little bit of thought needs to go around entering a not yet assessed for a significant number of pupils. However, let's get back to the 5-way proficiency itself. What I'd like to do now is to draw your attention to a handout that I've put on your table, and it really is a copy and paste version of the codes that are in the back of this school census information, and there you can see you have got your 5 codes. Now I think they're interesting, these codes. If you look at the top, the code A, that's quite an easy, straightforward code, isn't it? It is one that you definitely need to be using for your new arrivals. May use first language for learning and other purposes, may remain completely silent in the classroom, may be copying, repeating some words or phrases, etc. And of course, that bottom statement needs a considerable amount of EL support, as much as you'd expect. Again, the B, the early acquisition, isn't really going to pose teachers too many problems in terms of assessment. But again, look at the bottom statement there. Still needs a significant amount of EL support to access the curriculum. If we move on from the C to E codes, this is where the teachers might have to spend a little bit more time assessing pupils who are EAL learners. Developing competence. So may participate in learning activities with increasing independence, able to express self orally in English, but structural inaccuracies are still apparent. Literacy will require ongoing support, particularly for understanding text and writing. May be able to follow abstract concepts and more complex written English. Requires ongoing EAL support to access the curriculum fully. Now when we get down to D, competence, I'm just going to focus on the reading here. Can read and understand a wide variety of texts. Needs some support to access subtle nuances of meaning, to refine English usage, and to develop abstract vocabulary. And then, again, we're now talking about competent learners need some occasional EAL support to access complex curriculum material and tasks. So what it's saying to you is that even down to Code D, there is an expectation that you'll be providing some curriculum support for all those learners. But again, I find it really interesting to think about where you might place some of your learners. Some maybe that you've thought of as being fluent English speakers. About that last statement there. Literacy will require ongoing support, particularly for understanding text, may be able to follow abstract concepts and more complex written English. I'm going to read you a short paragraph from this year's Year 6 SATS Reading Comprehension Test. There she dangled, while Jenny pranced skittishly, and the warthog, intent on defending her young, let out enraged squeals from below. 5 baby warthogs milled around in bewilderment, spindly tails pointing heavenwards. Now, where would you assess those children according to that proficiency? It's an interesting one, isn't it?
It's not quite yet.
Just to clarify, you can only use these scales for UAL pupils.
So, what I'm really saying to you is that the codes around the C to F, and maybe even that sort of, the C to E, and particularly the D and E, might need a little bit more thinking through in terms of, you know, where you're going to place them. Okay, I just threw that in because I thought it was just an interesting, you know, application, you know, that sort of thought about how you go about applying those codes. And already I've had teachers coming to me and saying, well, I'm going to have to do that for 300 children, 400 children, and so on. You know, it's not just 1 or 2, is it, for some of you? It's for a whole lot more, and that's going to take up an awful lot more of your teacher's time. I think no matter how many pupils, EL pupils you've got in school, the amount of time taken in doing that assessment going to have to be factored in, you know, into the workload, isn't it? Before the first week in October, and then again maybe before more or less the first week in January. So just to leave that with you. Our new arrivals in the EL team are putting on some training. We initially did have a training session on the 14th of September, but I've got to say that due to the demand on that one already, there is another session tomorrow at the Salvation Army, and I've put flyers on your tables about these training sessions if you have got the capacity to send somebody onto one of those training sessions and you think it is appropriate to you know, to your school. So you know, those are available. You have got all the details on the flyers, and please do you know, take advantage of them. Jenny Smith, the senior consultant with the new arrivals and the EL team, is very keen to talk to you about any training packages you may need. And it may be that you think it's more appropriate to have some cluster training, families of schools, or, you know, in localities, and the team are available for to do that kind of training as well. So their booklet will be out to schools this week, and their hard copy will be reaching you by the beginning of next term to give you that more comprehensive range of EL training and support packages that you can access. Can I just ask, I'm going to finish there, have you any questions on what I've said so far? Do come and ask me later if you've got anything else you'd like to raise. Thanks very much.
You could talk about moderation as well in relation to that.
Absolutely. The team are talking and planning moderation across the city for schools who want to become involved in that for next term.
Just leave that on the screen for a second. There's contact information there if you want it. Our last presenter today is Bev, who's going to come and give you an update on where we are with school improvement strategy and the primary categorisation. We're ahead of time, which is good, because I know some of you need to go next door afterwards. So it's good to be on time today. Do you want me to give those out, Evan, and pass over to you?
I'm just about finished, actually. Morning, everyone. I haven't got a great deal to do this morning, apart from provide you with, mainly to provide you with the finalised categorisation grid. And I left enough copies on each table. Okay, so how did we come to that sort of finalised primary improvement categorisation grid, which we will be using from September? How did we come to it? Well, we came to it through you. Thank you so much for all your involvement in the dry run process. But I'm looking around the room, there are so many localities represented here that took that dry run very, very seriously, and we really appreciate the time, the smiles around the room now, memories of the day, you know, the time that you put into trialling the initial grid and seeing how it would work for your locality. We really appreciate it, because out of that time that you put in, we got so much very helpful feedback at the Primary Improvement Board meeting, the last Primary Improvement Board meeting in June, and on the basis of that we were able to produce what you've now got in front of you. I call it finalised. We expect it to evolve over the year. So in that respect it's not finalised, but it is the one that we will be using in September. The Primary Improvement Board will be meeting for its first meeting of the year on September the 13th, when we will just be revisiting that grid and going through the extensive guidance which will accompany this grid when it comes out to you, when the forms come out to you in September for completion. And we're hoping that before our 18th of October meeting, all schools, or primary schools across Sheffield, will have been categorised according to the new processes. Those of you who were present at the last Primary Improvement Board meeting may look at this document and say, that isn't quite the one that we agreed at the Primary Improvement Board meeting. The Learn Sheffield core team has had a look at the suggestions from the last meeting, and this grid was finalised on the basis of taking the suggestions from the Primary Improvement Board meeting and those from the core team, which of course, when I'm looking at Pete and Marie and Diane, those people have had lots of experience of categorisation previously, and they've given their thoughts to the process, and you know, we've taken advice obviously from them on how, as we said we would, on how the thing could work best. So that's what you've got. I think one of the key things you'll notice actually is the fact that we did discuss at great length at the Primary Improvement Board meeting whether the criteria for categorisation should come before, if you like, in terms of the columns, before the support and challenge offer. And one of the decisions that we played around with the Primary Improvement Board meeting was the idea that the support and challenge column should come before the criteria column, just to emphasise that that's what the categorisation process is all about. With hindsight, we didn't work it that way, because we found anyway that everyone's eyes were immediately drawn to the criteria and not the support and challenge column anyway, so we decided it just made sense to put that first. But you will spot, I'm sure you will spot when you get a chance to look at it properly, that all of your ideas about how the criteria should look differently are in there, okay? In some localities it was very strongly felt that certainly when it came to the red line, that there should be something in there about good schools that are feeling very vulnerable and would appreciate being coded, categorised as red. So you can see that we've changed the criteria, having listened to your views on that. So that's it. I'm sure that you'll all look at it and think, it still doesn't say this, or I would have preferred it if it said that. But we are going to work to this grid. We've got to start somewhere. We are going to work to this grid in September, and as I say, additional guidance will be provided. Head teachers that I've visited this week that are not too familiar with this are still asking me lots of questions around what else will go with the data to come to the categorisation table. If you can just keep reminding people actually that the self-evaluation form really is the most important document. And it's not just about the data, it's about what you're saying to us in the form that you fill in, your school self-evaluation form, which even with the amendments that we're suggesting shouldn't take any longer than 15-20 minutes to complete. So please keep reminding colleagues about that. In terms of the process within localities, there's been some very different sort of approaches within localities. Some localities feel very strongly that all head teachers should have an opportunity to sit at the steering group table, if you like, when their school is categorised, and some are going to go ahead with that idea. Other localities are thinking that a steering group can manage that process, and have thought that those localities have thought more about how the outcomes are communicated to schools. And what's the best way of sort of working that. We are not going to be prescriptive on how it works within your locality. So if you want to categorise as a whole locality around the table, all 22 schools or whatever it is, if that works best for you, sort of saying, oh, no, it wouldn't possibly work best for us, but some localities are saying, that would work best for us, then that's fine. We're not going to be prescriptive about those things. If you want to just have a small steering group running the categorisation process, inviting head teachers when their schools are being discussed, that's equally fine. But all of these suggestions will be put together in a document which will be with you in September when you come to fill in your school self-evaluation form. So do take those away. I'm aware that you've only got that one copy. It's late in the term anyway, but if head teachers are asking, I know there are no more meetings or very few meetings now before the end of the week, head teachers are asking, can you just sort of clarify where we're up to whenever you get the chance, and please point people in my direction should they need, if they're nervous about this process and should they need any more information, please point them in my direction, or indeed the direction of the Learn Sheffield Improvement Partners for your locality. So I shall leave that one with you, and we'll look forward to experiencing the new categorisation process in the autumn term. Stephen talked a little bit earlier about the Sheffield Priorities and School Improvement Strategy. Of course, that strategy, which is going to be with you for you to have a look at later in the summer, with a lot of work to do in the holidays, just as you've all got a lot of work to do in the holidays, sort of analysing data and what have you. Some of these documents are going to be finalised at Learn Sheffield during the holidays. What we're bearing in mind as we finalise these documents is that school improvement strategy needs to be the strategy that you're telling us it needs to be. This is a strategy that is based on partnership, which is based on us working as partners, all the primary schools in Sheffield working as partners to improve schools and make our schools great. That's the basis of what we're doing. We have a very small core team, as I said previously, at Learn Sheffield. We can't do this on our own. We need to work very closely with yourselves, with our growing numbers of associate Learn Sheffield partners, whom I will be meeting very early on. The date for that is not in my head. It might be the 15th of September, but it will be coming out within the next couple of days. We will be meeting very early on in the autumn term, in September, to plan how we can best support schools on the basis of what you're telling us you need in terms of support. So that whole strategy is based on us continuing to build on the relationships that we've managed to achieve this year, very positive relationships, and we'll continue to build on that with your support as we move forward through next year. Stephen, you've already talked about governors.
I might just chip in on that last bit, just to say, in September what we'll also do
is make sure you've got resources to support communicating the new approach to governance, because I think that the Primary Improvement Board, there were a lot of very good points about its heads getting their head around a new approach is one thing, but also then being able to communicate that to governors so governors understand the approach and how it's working and some of the shifts in culture. So we'll make sure that there also are some resources to support you in doing that, whether it be some slides to share or possibly some short clips and things like that where people are explaining the different categories and the thought process behind it. There is a fundamental shift here, isn't there, from categorisation being, if you like, just desserts. So in other words, it's a kind of what does the school deserve, as in it's got an Ofsted judgment, it's got this, it's got that, to be more about a triage activity, which is about making sure that the right resources are going to the right places to support schools. And that's a different culture, that's a different starting point. And we are appreciative of the fact that that's difficult for people to get their heads around, and it will be difficult to communicate. So we'll try and make sure we support that with the resources in the autumn. Okay.
Steve, on the last bullet point in Amber accessing support, it says early signs of improvement having caused concern. Does it mean early signs of improvement having previously caused concern?
Yes.
Sorry to read it, Auntie.
Yeah, no. It's good. We like that.
Which one are you reading?
It's the last bullet point in Amber.
Early signs of strong improvement but with vulnerabilities remaining. Have you got the right one? Have I given out the right one?
That's got the wrong. We've got green.
Early signs of improvement having caused concern.
Well, that's strange.
Because you
Oh, I got the early.
I have an updated one.
But if you look at the bullet point above, it says improving with remaining vulnerabilities. Is that not the same as the one below?
I'm looking at the wrong thing.
Early signs of strong improvement, but with vulnerabilities remaining.
Right, okay.
Are they not? They probably are now, Nicola,
Okay.
aren't they? Because I think previously the early signs of strong improvement talked about having previously caused concern.
Okay.
Because that doesn't say that anymore, they probably are very similar.
Okay.
Okay, thank you.
We'll make that. So this might not be the absolute final version that you've got in front of you today.
But you're absolutely right.
Are
Are you okay, Sheila?
Yes, I'm fine now.
Yeah.
Is it worth mentioning as well that when schools are looking at the criteria, it's if at least one of those bullet points apply to the school, not necessarily 3 out of 6 or 4 out of 7. If any one of them fit your school, then it's likely to be that colour, but also that's different to the support and challenge colour. It's likely to be all of those bullet points. So I think it's different there. So the criteria, if any one of those, or if at least one of those apply, but in the right-hand side column, it's likely to be all of those that will apply to the school. That's right.
Yes, Pete,
Yeah, the right
that's
hand
absolutely right.
column is the
Thank you
offer,
for
isn't
that.
it?
Yes, yes, absolutely. And that is about what Stephen's just said, getting the right package of support. That's what this whole process is about. It's about ensuring that you're getting the right package of support to get you to where you want to be. Are there any other questions about that?
Okay.
Thank you.
Just to finish with today, can I just plug the assessment conference, which is tomorrow? I know some colleagues in the room were in the one on Friday. We're repeating it tomorrow. There are some places available, although it is quite busy tomorrow. It's the morning. So you come from 8:30 and have a coffee. I can't remember if it starts at 8:30 or 9. Is it 9? Okay. It's 2 sessions. One is looking at the national and local data and looking ahead to some of those issues, and the other one is looking at STAT and the evolution of STAT and new materials there. So both those sessions will run tomorrow. I think we're up to about 80 people coming tomorrow. We can accommodate 100-ish if we need to. Okay, so do come and let us know. Just turn up tomorrow and sign on the bottom of the sheet if you haven't booked in. Okay, good to see you all, colleagues. Have a lovely summer holiday when it comes, whatever it looks like. And thank you for all your support this year.